Step 3, you grow hard about what you want to be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up.
Welcome to Tales from the Field. My name is Bradley Ball, and we are back and better than ever. They added a new sound button, and the sound button was from us, so I don't know if I actually got through because I hit the sound button instead of the background music. Thank you, StreamYard, for that update. So welcome to Tales from the Field. My name is Bradley Ball. We are back and better than ever. This is our Live 360 series. I am very, very excited for us to kick this off. Live 360 is my favorite conference every single year. I've been coming to Live 360 since 2011 when I had some folks reach out to me because I've been blogging, of all things. I mean, literally, I was active blogging. I was active presenting in the Orlando data community, and that gave me the opportunity. There was an invitation. Hey, we're starting a local conference. Would you be interested in going? And here I am 14 years later, doing this wonderful live stream with you. And Dan, you took down the music all the way. I mean, you got to give me a warning when you do that. It's not going to repeat, buddy. I've got it. Don't worry. I'm semi-professional. We've done this before. So I am, of course, here joined by Mr. Thomas LaRock, Microsoft MVP for the data platform. I am joined by Daniel Taylor, DBA Bulldog. He is from the Microsoft Content Migration Factory, Content Acceleration Factory. He helps move things to the cloud. If you are looking for a workload that you want to send over to the cloud in Microsoft, it's a complimentary service. You just got to talk to your CSA, and then they will help scope that engagement and be able to put it together. So Dan's literally the person that you're going to end up talking to. There's a lot of great people on his team if it's not Dan, but Dan is one of the amazing people that you will end up speaking to. And of course, me, I also work at Microsoft, but as you know, I'm Bradley Ball, and I'm a big part of the Tales from the Field organization and crew. And we are talking Live 360 today. Again, this is my favorite time of the year. We get into the fall, and I used to say this all the time before I joined Microsoft, and when we were going to other conferences, typically the Past Summit, sometimes we're at other stuff, but every single year, if I don't get accepted to one of those conferences, I go, okay, maybe next year. But I always felt like if I don't get accepted to Live 360, I am literally sad, because first off, we are on the luscious grounds of the beautiful Universal Studios lot over in Orlando, Florida. As you're walking to the conference center, you're going to hear people launching in the Hulk roller coaster. You're going to hear people screaming on the Dr. Doom Tower of Terror drop. You're a boat ride away. You're a quick walk. I mean, it's only about a 10-minute walk from the hotel on a nice little trail to be able to get to the downtown Universal area. Dan, you look like you're contemplating something. What are you thinking about?
All these years, I thought the screaming was for you and Thomas. I didn't know that. I thought it was you walked outside and that was your adoring fan. So now I'm a little disheartened, but yeah.
I never had adoring fans. Tom was always a big deal, though. So they're probably there for Tom. That's what I would imagine. But regardless of that, one of the first things I want to do is I'm going to send out over the chat real quick to everyone. I'm going to send a link to our workshop, because we are here specifically. Oh, it is not letting me do that. We used to be able to do that. Let me pop it. It just said YouTube does not support comments on. Well, interesting. I got to change the settings on this. So I'm going to send this out over on the chat using my SQL Balls account. So one of the things to check out is that we have a link to our pre-con. And our pre-con, let me go ahead and you would think I had done this, and then I didn't accidentally leave the meeting right before we were about to go live. But let me go ahead and add my screen real quick. We have an amazing workshop that we're going to be doing, and that's what our live stream today is specifically about. Now, first off, if you are joining us, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us. And if you're watching the recording, if you have questions, we want to make sure that we are listening to your questions. And so file them away into the chat. We will see them. We will add them to the screen. You will be a part of the conversation. Second thing is, this is about our pre-con. Next week, we also have Microsoft MVP Matt Gordon, and we have Principal PM Christopher Schmidt talking about their pre-con for real-time intelligence. The week after that, we have Reza Rad joining us, Microsoft MVP, specifically talking about his pre-con for Power BI for the data professional for Microsoft Fabric. And then we're going to do a know before you go. And that's going to cap this off. And before you know it, we are going to be there. We are on the road to Live 360 right now. And I'm very, very excited for this. We'll talk more about the resort, the location, and what we're going to be doing in the know before you go. But you don't want to miss out on this. This is our pre-con, maximizing performance in SQL Server and in Azure SQL. So the link is in the comments. So we want to make sure that you can go and you can take a look at this, and that you can take a look at the description and see if this is something you want to do. And that's what we're going to be talking about this hour. We're literally going to be talking about what we're going to be doing during this full day together. And we hope you decide to come and join us. Your time is valuable and we want to make the most out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking some questions to my wonderful colleagues here. Tom, I'm trying to think. This is what, 2-3 years in a row we've been doing pre-cons together. What has you excited about the pre-con that we're going to be putting together this year?
Fair question. What am I excited about? I mean, besides sharing the stage with you and Dan?
Always a good time.
Always a good time. I hadn't thought about what's the most exciting thing, but what I enjoy the most is interacting with the attendees. I almost said students. That's the teacher in me, right? What I enjoy is interacting with them. I'll say sharing stories of how we're using the technology in different ways, because there's always something to learn. But in this particular case, we get to talk about a lot of SQL Server 25 features that probably people haven't seen in action. They may have heard about, but haven't seen yet. And so that's when some of the best stories come out, is when you say, hey, here's a thing that's new and it solves this problem that you're probably having right now. And then you start diving in, like, how are they solving that problem today? And you start sharing that information with other people in the room. And it just makes for a better overall experience. So that's the type of thing that I think I enjoy the most. I wouldn't say excited, but that's the thing I'm always looking forward to.
Okay. That's fair. Dan, how about you? I'm going to put you on the spot now. What are you most excited about when it comes to the course that we're going to be doing?
Yeah, for me, the most exciting part about doing these with y'all is either on breaks or in between sessions, where either those folks that are being introduced to the product or even the senior folks that have been using it for a while come up to you and go, you know what? I didn't know that. You taught me something today that I had no clue existed, or how I could use it differently. Like, for example, a lot of folks go to managed instance and they don't performance tune, or they don't look at the different metrics. And we're going to share some of that stuff during this session. But I get a lot of folks during my SQL Saturdays or different places like that, even internally within Microsoft, that go, wow, that's something cool. And we wouldn't have had to roll back if we knew that. So that's where I get most excited, is when folks come up and they say, I learned something new today, or even I learned stuff, but the most important part was the interaction with the attendees, as Tom would call them, students, because that's the teacher in them. But, the interaction with the attendees is the most important. And I think for me, I've been to a lot of different conferences, the Live 360 folks, and I'm not alienating all you other conferences out there, but the Live 360 folks are this most genuine people I've met in a long time. They're there to learn.
I completely agree, and I'm not looking to alienate anybody, but I am going to say, like, if I were to rank the conferences, I'm going to go ahead and do it. That's me. Like, either you're going to invite me to speak, or you're not going to invite me to speak. I'm going to go with number one is Live 360. I absolutely love it. I love amusement parks. I love Orlando. I mean, that's part of the reason that I live here. And the fact that we're, again, on the grounds of Universal Studios, it's just a quick walk over. Not to mention, it's the week before Thanksgiving. If you're looking for conferences, typically, and I know as my kids were younger, one of the difficult things was to plan a conference that you could take family and friends to, or your wife or your kids to. this is an easy win. Take a nice vacation the week before Thanksgiving, and part of your travel is probably going to be covered by your company. You just got to pay for the wife and the kids, and then you pay for tickets, and then you can join them after the conference is over. I mean, hello, yes, let's do that. But so I love this conference. SQL Bits, I'm going to say, is number 2 in my book. SQL Bits has a wonderful community feel, and not to mention, I mean, it's England, Wales, London, could be Manchester. I mean, they always go to a new location, and I've never been to a location where I haven't had wonderful food, met great people, had a good time at a pub, and their events and their costumes are just fantastic. It's been years since I've been. I have not been to Past Summit since pre-pandemic, but we did participate in some of the remote options during the pandemic while we were all trying to keep that going. And I do love the Past Summit. I do love Seattle, and so I would put that as potentially a number 3 for me. But I would say FabCon beats it out. And FabCon being in Atlanta this year, you know me, Dan, I do not care for Vegas. Vegas, not a bad city, but the majority of things in Las Vegas that I am attracted to, shows and food, we've got in Orlando. Only thing we don't have in Orlando that we have in Vegas is Din Tai Fung. But you put in FabCon in Atlanta, love Atlanta, love it being on the East Coast. So that may be number 4 for me. And again, one day I'll make it to the Past Summit again, if it's not the same week as Live 360. But if Live 360 is the same week, that's where I'm going to be. That's where I'm invested in. But I would say this pre-con in particular, what I love about this is we're going to be talking about, and you guys know me, I'm a deep technical nerd. I love to go into internals and things of that nature. But what I really like most about that stuff is the way that you can unlock an understanding for people. And that's what I'm excited to do this time around, is that when we see that aha moment, when somebody is able to take something that we've said and apply it to a problem that they're currently facing at work, and they're reaching back to people, they're asking for slide decks, they're asking, for your concepts or for your thoughts on this so they can work out a problem. Because everybody comes to a technical conference with, here's the stuff we've got going on in work in the back of our head. And so to me, if we can take the complex and make it simple, distill it down to where people can learn it, they can enjoy it. And I'm really excited about the interactive nature of what we're going to have for this course. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I don't think people realize this, because we've been talking about this and we've been planning this. And from the beginning, we said, how do we make this really interactive? So we're not just up there lecturing for hours. And we're going to do some splitting up into groups. We're going to do some knowledge interactive exercises where people are going to be able to flex those muscles that we've just given them based off the content that we're covering. And I'm very, very excited for that. But we're also covering a wide gambit of things. And that's the thing. And Tom, I'm going to pitch it back over to you. But when we think about maximizing performance in SQL Server, the number one thing people, and there are differences when we talk about SQL Server and Azure SQL. Naturally, if you're building something for a cloud topology, you've got to have a distributed type of topology that you're building off of. It's different than if you just have a server on-prem that you're standing up an SMP instance on. But fundamentally, what you do in the engine for one is what you're doing in the engine for others. And there may be some differences when we get to newer versions, but largely, if you get the concept of locking, blocking, indexing, recovery models, IOPs, networking, CPU, if we can translate all those things and go, this is how it works with SQL. And then here's how we translate what the cloud means. So that way you can understand how that works. I love the idea that we just take that fundamental concept of it's just SQL and we apply it to these different things to be able to help people out. So Tom, my question to you is, when you think about SQL, having been Microsoft certified master, been an MVP, and you've worked with your hands on SQL, you've been a DBA, you've been a DBA manager, you've been an evangelist, you've done all these different things. When you go, here's a fundamental concept, and people constantly need to learn this. We get new people into the field. People constantly are coming up and they're talking to me, and here's advice I give them. What do you think about with that when it comes to SQL Server, and just go, it's all just SQL, but here's something that you got to know?
What's your actual question there?
Yeah. Talk to me about a fundamental thing that people ask you about a lot in SQL.
Okay. Because you threw a lot at me. So, like 5 minutes ago, you said, Tom, I'm going to throw it to you. And then there's a whole lot of words. I was like, what's the actual question? So the thing that The thing that I want to share, that I want to make sure people know, the most fundamental basic thing, and that answer is weights, which really means understanding how the SQL Server operating system, the SQL OS, functions. Because I think that's the gateway to understanding everything else that you're going to be seeing and experiencing when you use not just SQL Server, but any database, right? I mean, understanding how the query or request comes into the engine, what that engine then has to do in order to take a logical request and return physical results. That's the fundamental I think people have to have. And again, once you start understanding that, a lot of things kind of come into focus, in my opinion.
Excellent. No, I think that is a really, really key area. And that's definitely something we're going to be covering, because it's part of that fundamental understanding of how does SQL Server work? How does SQL Server operate? And again, it goes through every single version. Like weight stats are in Azure SQL Database and Fabric SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance and Azure VMs and on-prem SQL Server 2012, 2014, 2016, 2019, 2022, 2025. We got weight stats in all of them. And again, it's just one of those through lines that what we're going to be covering is that core knowledge that really applies to everything. So Dan, how about you? I'm going to turn over the same question, and because of Tom, I'm going to make it much more simpler this time. What is a concept that comes to SQL Server that people are constantly coming up and talking to you about, that you think is fundamental and goes across every version?
So it's funny, Tom and I were joking about this, I think last week or the week before, about the different like VMs and VMware and the different things we used to host on premises, right? And we had to know, and this backs up some of what Tom was saying about weight stats, is we had to know a little bit about the hardware, but usually that was taken care of for us. And I remember once, admin saying, "Don't worry your pretty little head about this, just use your database over there," right? And then they didn't set ballooning, and I used all they took all my memory from SQL Server. So it was an interesting conversation. But I think one of the things we're going to talk about, and we're going to touch on it at a level here, intermediate level within our workshop, is understanding a little bit about the hardware and the capacity and the metrics that you would need to look at, right? Because when we move to Azure as a individual, we need to know a little bit or some about the IOPs, your networking, your SSDs, what type of memory, what is your max memory, what type of IOPs are you going to get? So understanding those weight stats is also builds into understanding what you get from particular components, especially when moving to Azure. It's not your on-premises data center. It's not that. We had a lot of flexibility there. We have flexibility in Azure, but we need to know where that flexibility begins and where it ends, right? So that's one of the most our components when folks talk about migrating from on-premises to Azure. That's one of those conversations, those key conversations I like to have with folks. And we're going to cover some of that here in our workshop, and it definitely builds on what Tom was saying there about weight stats, and also on top of what you were talking about there, Brad, with some of the different components with the different versions of SQL Server and that.
So I'm gonna go in a slightly different direction, because I appreciate you both saying weight stats, and I absolutely love that. And weight stats is such a key thing for people to know. But one of the things, I've been presenting a talk on indexing, and I've done this talk on indexing in various forms, for about 14 years now. And one of the things I have found over and over again giving it is how often people will come into the room. I will cover indexing. We cover the core internals of indexing, which is something we're going to cover as well. Why they are important, why they matter for performance, the management of them, and how the management of them also really matters for performance. And the thing that always strikes me is there are some things that are evergreen from a technology perspective. If you don't know these things, you're going to need to know about them. Weight stats is one of those things because it talks about scheduling and the way we use memory and IOPs and threads and the way everything works within SQL Server. And it really takes us down the rabbit hole of performance tuning and understanding how we size workloads and do we have enough physical hardware and where are our bottlenecks. But with indexing, I've been to places where they had, and I want you to truly take this in when I say it, they had no non-clustered indexes in their database whatsoever. They only had clustered indexes because they knew they needed clustered indexes, but they didn't understand that they needed non-clustered indexes as well and what a non-clustered index could do for them. I've been places where they took, what was the old thing? Database Tuning Advisor. And they ran Database Tuning Advisor and they applied it. And it said, here's all these indexes you need to include for performance. And things got better. So what did they do? They ran it again and then they applied it. And then they ran it again and then they apply it. And eventually it's not helping the way it used to, but they just keep running it and they just keep applying it, hoping it's going to start working again. There's one place that I went to, God bless them, wonderful, wonderful folks, but they had hundreds and hundreds. I mean, literally one table I remember had like close to 400 indexes on it. And there was another one that had 295. I mean, like every database had hundreds of indexes on every single table, non-clustered indexes. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of overhead there that created. There was a lot of sizing and issues that created. And just understanding the proper way to be able to use indexing. So one of the things I fundamentally say in so many presentations is that SQL Server is an application. It's written by application developers. It's not written by DBAs, which makes sense to me because you wouldn't want a DBA to come in and write your application code. You want a DBA to come in and manage your data. But the people who are writing SQL Server are developers. And so understanding how the application works, understanding how to be able to use that application in the way that the application developers intended you to use it helps you understand how to be able to get a higher level of performance associated with that. So I guess on that note, my next question is going to be, Tom, I'm going to pitch it to you. So let me be very concise and then I'm going to babble on while I let you come up with an answer. So my concise question to you would be, what is something about the way that SQL Server is constructed as an application that the folks at Microsoft thought, this is how I want people to do this? And often you see customers doing the exact opposite of it. And what's a fundamental thing that we're probably going to cover for performance to be able to go, you keep doing this, you should really be doing this. And the reason I ask that question is I've seen a lot of places where there's logical best practices and people just don't know. I mean, you can't have an encyclopedic knowledge of everything. And it's very unfair to think that, but there are those of us like us that are very technically curious that keep diving into these things. We find these things. So let me cut over to you. Do you have something for me? What's a way that SQL Server, that Microsoft wanted it to be used as an application, but we see people go and do things that they shouldn't be doing with it?
Right. So that's the question. Something that Microsoft wishes you would be doing it this way, but the reality is people do it this other way.
Yeah.
Oh, a few examples come to mind right away. Most of them have to do with like security and permissions. Because I'm old school. It's like, Microsoft would really like for you to, make sure everything is locked down and least privileges. And the reality is people run around as sysadmin all the time. They're just granted, more permissions than they really need to do their work. So that's one thing. I'm sure I could think of other examples. That was the first one that came to mind. Right.
No, that's a really solid one. I mean, granted, we're not going to be covering a ton of security within there. I mean, but people get time with us. They can talk to us, and security has always been a passion of yours. We have talked about this back and forth because I worked for the Office of the President. And one of the things that I learned when I took that job was, and they didn't tell you this in the interview, was if there was some type of violation, I would be the person called to testify before Congress. Yeah. And they don't pay for the lawyer for that either. You need to pay for your own lawyer to come with you to Congress and tell you not to talk. But I would be the person, if there was a data breach, if there was a security issue, that would have to go and testify as to what happened and why. And we talked about the fact that from a perspective of security, there are little things where in the SQL Server community, like changing ports. We've talked about this, changing the default port. And you would say, change the default port if you could. And people would lambaste that. And I would go, yeah, but if you're the person who has to sit in front of Congress, do you want to be the person who said, we did everything we could, even the little things that we knew just would slow them down, but wouldn't stop them, but we did everything we could? Or do you want to go, well, you see, that thing really doesn't matter, so we didn't do it.
Right.
And you work for SolarWinds, and SolarWinds was very much in the news when their breach happened. And so there's a lot from a security standpoint when we look at our backgrounds that we go, hey, we're extra sensitive towards this stuff. But that's not a bad thing, because customers are also extra sensitive. I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's when you're going to get breached, and how much data is going to be breached really depends on the level of effort you've done to be able to try and protect yourself from things. And nobody can do it forever. Microsoft has certainly faced their share of challenges as well. But from a security standpoint, anything you want to add? But that's a great example on Microsoft would wish you would do it one way and people often do it another.
Yeah, I think this isn't just an issue unique, to Microsoft or to SQL Server in general. I think technology presents itself as to be used in a certain way, and then the people using it decide how they're going to do it. It's kind of like language. Is it GIF or JIF? Well, the people decide how we want to pronounce that word. Right. And GIF is correct. So,
exactly.
I mean, there's lots of little things that come into play as well, like for design. Microsoft would probably tell you, well, at one point, they'd probably tell you to think about normal forms and to design your relational database in a certain way. Of course, people didn't do that. It was mostly a glorified spreadsheet to a lot of people. They would take Excel tables and just load it, do like a swap, a 1-for-1, say, well, I used to do this in Excel, so just create me a table in SQL Server that looks just like this monstrosity with 300 columns. And you would just do that. And now you're using an application for SQL Server for something that may not have been intended for at that time. Storing blob images. I can do that. Should I be doing that? And I think that's what it comes down to. It's how easy is it for people to make use of the tool you're giving them? And if it's super easy to do certain things, that's the things that they'll do, right? Path of least resistance. Whether or not Microsoft wants it to be done that way, that's a different story. That doesn't matter. People pay for it. They get to use it. This is how I want to use it. And I'm going to store all of these images in my database for some weird reason. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can.
To be fair, at one point in time, it may have made sense, but we've been working with SQL Server. I mean, I think my first version of SQL Server was 6.5. Yeah. And when you start looking at older versions of SQL Server and what we had available to us in the world, I mean, I remember a point in time when, 10 gigabyte hard drive was thousands and thousands of dollars. And everybody was, thought a massive database was something that was 2 to 4 gigs. And now we all see massive databases and we go, well, when you get up to 10 to 20 terabytes, you're getting pretty big. Yeah. But there's much bigger databases than that. Dan, I'm going to go with the same question to you. What's something about SQL Server that people often do, but the way the application is built, the way that Microsoft built the stack of code around SQL Server, they would like it to be something else? Do you have something?
So first off, on the large objects and databases, I've worked with so many clients trying to untangle that because of, and it leads to the next thing. I think that Microsoft would like you to see you do it this way, but a lot of people don't, is the size of the database that you need to back up and recover, right? Even if you stripe it 64 ways, which is the max you can stripe something, it's going to take forever. I had a client who had close to 8, 9, I think it was 12 terabytes, and we removed all the large objects from it, and it became like 820 gig when we put all the pointers in there. That was much easier to back up and recover in the event of an emergency. And that leads me to a couple things that I think Microsoft designed something and people may not know, or they think it's too difficult, or they don't do it. One, they leave, and some databases can be done this way, but they leave their databases in full or in simple recovery, right? And then when they want to try and recover they can't recover, and they haven't fully defined their SLAs, right? Their RPO and their RTO. So that's one thing Microsoft has done, I believe, has done really well, is allow us to back up our data, but recover it to a point in time. And I see a lot of people not do that, right? They just leave it in simple recovery and things go on their merry way, and they recover and they're like, well, we lost 24 hours of data. Yes, you did. So now we're going to do log backups. The other thing that I think Microsoft has designed really well to build into Tom's security conversation is transparent data encryption. A lot of people do not apply TDE to their databases, not knowing that if somebody breached your environment and got to those backups, they could easily move them from your environment to another without you even knowing it, right? You wouldn't even know your data has been moved off the server unless you have a solid team that's tracking data egress off that server. So next thing you know, somebody's restored your database and sharing your client's secret. I often joke, if I get one more letter in the mail from a hospital organization that says your data has been breached, we're giving you free monitoring for the next X number of years, I'm going to die with all the number of free data monitoring services that I've been provided, because people didn't take the simple precautions of protecting their data. And Microsoft has made that really easy to do, but a lot of folks don't implement that. And that's one of the things I think we've designed that people use it differently. So yeah.
I like that. Okay, so I'm going to take this from a performance standpoint. And I think often the thing that I see, and I will call myself out on this, when I was very early as a developer in my first job, I remember writing some super complex SQL to be able to feed a dashboard and a classic ASP page that executives were going to be going to internally and looking at. And I needed to get this data to be able to render it. And there was a consultant walked by, he looked over my shoulder and he goes, that should really be a stored procedure. And he kept walking. And I went, what's a stored procedure? Because I didn't know, because you don't come out of the womb with all the SQL knowledge in the world. Everybody had to learn it at some point in time. We were all new at some point in time. And when you look at code reuse within SQL Server, we pass ad hoc statements all the time to the database, or we pass super complicated stored procedures with dynamic SQL. And they're ideally what we want is we want a stored procedure that has an execution plan, or has some level of one of the newer optimizers where we've got the query performance improvements, the QPI to be able to have the join conditions that can alter based off of statistics. We really want to be using stored procedures more than we want to be using that ad hoc code. And the reason is it goes into the buffer cache. It can be called, it can be reused. We can shortcut optimization, which is expensive and requires a lot of CPU cycles. And ideally, Microsoft would like it when they build SQL Server if you were using more stored procedures than if you were using ad hoc SQL code. Now, if you have a lot of ad hoc SQL code, there's some settings that you can set to be able to optimize for ad hoc workloads, to be able to allow for that plan reuse. And I do want to point out real quick, we've got a little stream going on at the bottom. You can see we actually teamed with the folks from the conference. They were very, very nice to us. They are offering $500 off your registration for the conference if you use the code Tales from the Field, all one word. So make sure and do that if you are signing up for the conference. Right now, the conference has a $300 discount. We can get to you $200 more by using our discount code. So please make sure and do that.
500 beans is a lot, Brad. I mean,
it is.
Here's how I look at it, right? 500 beans, right? $500. When we look at how much you could save, that's teeny, right? That's going out to dinner with family. That's telling your boss, look, on a normal night, I would spend $50. I'm going to be there 4 days. That's $200 in food, right? That they would have spent. Well, right here, you're getting that in the expenses. And then if you shop for your flight early enough, and we're still far enough out, you may be able to find a good rate on your flight, and this could help pay for that, right? So take advantage of that code, Tales from the Field, right? Sign up. We'd love to have you out there signing up early for this so we could know who's attending the workshop. And that helps us also plan, right, Brad? Because we're going to break up into these groups, which people really love in that interaction. So help us out, sign up early, get that $500 off registration. Tales from the Field, Tales from the Field, Tales from the Field. Back to you.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dan. Well, so that actually tees up the next question that I'm going to ask the two of you. When we look at the conference that we're going to be teaching, there's a lot of different areas that we have not hit, because we've talked a little bit about understanding query performance. We've understanding how the cloud works, so that people understand the different IOPs that we have within workloads, things of that nature. We're also covering sizing workloads, and also scaling out workloads. And when we look at scaling out workloads, there's some different technologies that we're going to use for different architectures. Also for sizing workloads, I know for myself, that was a fundamental thing where it really, really helped advance my career. I was on Fort Monroe working with the team that did our database stuff, and we went into these meetings, and constantly it was just a round robin of the same question. We had meetings for like 4 or 5 months. It wasn't helpful. And we went in because we were building a new application system, and we said, DBAs, we're going to order new hardware. What hardware do we need for the database? And the DBA would look at the system team, and they would say, system team, you collect the performance metrics on the database. What do we need for the database server? And the system team would look at the application developers and go, well, what are you looking at doing in the application that's any different, so that way we can drive the hardware for the database? The application team would then look at the database and go, yeah, so what are the metrics on the current database that we need to be able to add new hardware so that way the application can perform? They would look at the system team, tell us about the metrics. And it literally was a round robin over and over again. I was getting my SQL Server 2005 certifications. And I'll never forget, there was one of the first books for, I think, the ITP, which was the second level certs. I'd gotten the basic level. And then I go to get the next level, and it was 2 tests. I opened up that first book, and the first chapter was sizing workloads. And it showed how to be able to take perfmon counters, how to be able to put those into an Excel file, and how to be able to chart your database growth, your CPU utilization, your memory utilization, so you could find out what you needed. And I went to the lead DBAs and I said, hey, can I put these perfmon counters on our databases? And so that way I can collect this. And they said, what do we have to do? I said, nothing. I'm going to aggregate this. I'm going to put it in Excel. I will send this out to you every single month. I just need permission to be able to set this up on the server. And they said, okay. Put in my change request, got it all done, got it in place. After a month, I collected the metrics. After 2 months, I collected the metrics. 3 months, I collected the metrics. I could then start to get a trend. I went into this meeting. I let it go around the room 1.5 times until it came back to me, and I stood up and I had all these papers and I passed them out to everybody. And I said, here's our trend. Here's what we're looking at. The highest thing we're using is memory. We didn't have, it was x86 at the time. Can we get 64-bit hardware? No, we can't. Okay, well, can we get extra memory? And we'll flip the PAE AWE switch so that way we can extend the addressable memory beyond 4 gigabytes. Sure thing, we could do that. Disk looks fine. CPU looks good. We just need more memory. 1 year later, they went to have this meeting. And beforehand, 30 people are in the room. Well, this time they invited me, but when you invite me, you got to invite all my bosses, I guess. And so it's me and 5 or 6 of my bosses. We show up, we're in a conference room, and it's just the high-level government folks. And they go, Brad, what do we need for a server? And I pass out the sheets of paper and I go, here's the graphs. We're good on this. We're good on this. I said, can we get x64 because the memory utilization is still growing? And they were like, we can get x64 this year. I said, great. If we could get x64, this is the amount of memory we need. This should buy us 3 years. And they went great. And it was one meeting. But that one meeting made me the go-to voice for what we needed for the database. That advanced my career massively in that regard. And so sizing workloads to me is always something I look at because it really helped me. It was something I didn't know how to do, and I view it as super key. And so when we think about sizing workloads, my question, Dan, I'm going to go to you first, and then Tom, I'm going to go to you, is tell me what's important about understanding and sizing workloads and why it matters when we look at Azure SQL and also on-prem SQL. Because I really think this is a through line again. Dan?
Yeah, so not knowing is the worst scenario ever, right? I can say, you can ask me, what do you need for a SQL Server instance, right? I'm going to tell you I need 80 cores, 2 terabytes of memory, and 6 terabytes of disk. straight off the bat, you're going to ask me if you don't give me time to gather those metrics, right? I'm just going to spitball something and it's going to be the worst case scenario ever. So, and then they're going to go, that's $1 million. And I go, well, you asked me. So that's what you got. But if we size up and we look at this from a holistic perspective and we gather those stats over time, like you did, it gives us that, first off, those metrics for that spreadsheet, right? The first thing we need to be very careful of these days is spending money, right? We're in an environment where things are expensive and corporations don't have a lot of money, or small businesses don't have a lot of money to spend on hardware. So we need to be as accurate as possible for them to have these things done correctly. So from a sizing perspective, there's different tools that you mentioned. In the workshop, we're going to talk about some of these tools. We're going to talk about the assessment. We may look at Database Watcher. We're definitely going to look at some other things, and then how you can gather these. And you want to do these over time. You don't want to gather metrics just from one sample. You got to gather from multiple samples. And I believe we are in a, sorry, you got all the clump talking about that. We are in a day and age where we scale out, or we're asked to scale out, right? Let me rephrase that. I apologize. We're in a day and age where folks are asking us, what can we do to improve the performance on our SQL Server VM we have, or our Azure managed instance, or something like that? Let's stick with SQL Server. In the analytics realm, we have many components now. We have different processes we can use to scale out our analytics. So we could take our workloads off of our SQL Server VM and we can move them to a Azure SQL DB or an MI using these metrics that we've gathered from using our tooling. So sorry, I went in a circle there and I lost myself. But anyhow, in a short note, I love when Brad puts me on the spot. That was not a question we rehearsed. So I love it. I love it when you put me on the spot.
We rehearse.
There was a rehearsal.
Those 30 seconds before the call. That time we had no. So in TLDR, yes, there's scaling it or analyzing your workloads and your environments is very key, because we're in a day and age where we can use different services out there like managed instance and SQL PaaS to place our analytic workloads over there very easily. And we'll cover those in the workshop. So yes.
Okay. So
Tom, lots of words and lots of things.
Tom, tell me, when you think about workload and workload sizing, things of that nature, how does that impact our work with on-prem systems with Azure SQL as well?
Well, so there's a few things that come together in all of this. So Brad, I'm going to address your career arc there, where you talked about collecting those metrics in order to, have a meaningful conversation with somebody about what your hardware requirements truly were. And you brought data to the conversation. And I think that underscores what is the evolution of database administrators or database developers. Because it used to be, for the most part, a database developer was somebody who had functional business knowledge that they could translate and put into SQL. And then they would write the query and be like, this is what the business needs. The thing's slow. Go and tell the DBA to go make it faster. So now you as the DBA there, Brad, are trying to figure out the workloads and the spikes and the usage of the application and what's really needed to run all that code that's happening. And again, I think that's the evolution of what we now just call a data engineer, which is somebody that needs to know a little bit of code and a little bit of infrastructure and understand how it's all related in order to be more effective at what you do. So with regards to right-sizing workloads, again, this is a database engineering or a database reliability engineering, where now you're talking about how do you capture that? How do you translate it? And if somebody says, hey, I heard about this cloud thing, let's just migrate. How do you compare an apples to apples comparison between what you're running in your own colo somewhere versus what you're going to get for Azure SQL database versus a managed instance right, versus an Azure SQL VM, and all the different options that you have, and what those true costs will be in order to meet your usage demands, right? That becomes, again, kind of its own skill set, where you can collect the meaningful information and help somebody right size. Because what you don't want to happen, and this has happened a lot through the years, you don't want to migrate your stuff to the cloud and be like, how come this isn't performing as well as it should? And how come we're paying way more money and not getting near the performance we used to have? And so this is important stuff, right? Because you want to have that optimization. You want to be able to provide the best possible performance and experience for your end users and minimizing your costs. And that's an ongoing thing. That's never complete, right? Yeah, that's continuous monitoring of your environment to make sure you're hitting those goals. And now, you're no longer just a DBA or just a developer. You're getting into that database engineering category. And where do you want to take it from there? Does that help answer your question?
That's great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
And it goes back to that whole indexing, right? We had you had a client that had no indexes. They just had a bunch of hash tables, right? And if they would move that to a managed instance or an Azure SQL DB, not knowing the reads that they were doing, because it's all pretty much probably hitting disk at that point, they would have a miserable experience. To Tom's point, you could scale up all you want. You could buy 80 cores, but it's still not going to perform as well as it did on premises because you have an IOPs issue. So great call out there, Tom. I love that.
Well, and what I was going to say is, you're absolutely right. And this is one of the things I hope we're going to convey, and I hope people are going to get for this, is you need a universal translator, like a nice little Star Trek button to be able to allow the communication from on-prem to cloud. And I spent 6.5 years as part of the Fast Track product group in Azure, and our whole point was to move people from on-prem into Azure. And so I can't tell you how many of these workloads I did. So I always feel like this is a really good sweet spot for me, is to be able to go, how do I speak cloud? How do I speak Azure? Because whether you're going to AWS, GCP, or us, you're going to need to know, how is a cloud fundamentally different than on-prem? And so what we're going to cover is how you speak Azure. How does the IOPs, the CPU, the memory that I had on-prem, how does that equate? But I also want to say something and take something that you said as well, because often people go, well, this is more expensive. This is not more expensive. Okay. Because when you look at on-prem, you look at OpEx versus CapEx, right? And then there's also ongoing reoccurring costs that you might not necessarily see. When you own something on-prem, and Dan, you and I worked for a couple of different companies together where we had data centers on-prem. You're paying for the electricity, you're paying for the rack space, you're paying for the people to be able to maintain all of that. That's not free. That's a cost. And you could probably take that and you could average it up, and you could take a portion of it monthly to go, what work do you need to do? But that's a cost that you don't see. But then there's also CapEx, which is, we're going to buy this server, and this server might be a couple $100,000. It might be $1 million. And we're going to spend this, and we're going to spend this one time. What your accountants do is they look at that and they depreciate the value of that physical hardware over time. When you go to the cloud, you're using something called OpEx. And OpEx is specifically that we have an operating cost that's going to be taken out of our profit and our revenue. But when you're converting from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, you have to have leadership buy-in. The DBA isn't going to be worried about that, but your business is worried about that. They're worried about, what is this difference? So when people try and tell me they're moving from the prem to the cloud, and they're like, this is so much more expensive, part of me is like, I don't think you're thinking about the true cost of this. You're not thinking about the electricity. You're not thinking about the people to be able to be there, the physical hardware, the rack space, the benefits that you have to pay, all this different stuff. And if you took all of that and you then equated that out to the cloud, you would start to get a very different ratio. Now, if you're renting something in another data center, absolutely, at that point in time, you can probably do a dollars to donuts comparison of, here's what my cost is, because you're already in an OpEx model. If you're going from cloud to cloud, you're probably already on an OpEx model. And so I think it's also important for people to realize, like, look, things cost a lot because of certain things. And here's the things that add up to it. Now, also on that note, if we're using the performance sizing workloads, and we find we don't need this much memory. We don't need this much CPU. We don't need this size of a system, especially if you're on a PaaS system like an Azure SQL database or on an imagined instance. It is not a migration to go to a smaller physical footprint. It is, what we can do is we can actually just go into the Azure portal and we can take that workload and we can scale things down. There are options like serverless databases that we could use in Azure SQL, where we're spinning up and down based off of your on-demand performance. So there's some options that hopefully we're going to be able to tell people in this universal translator session that we're going to have. And we're covering that up front. And the reason we're covering that up front is you have to understand how these things correspond with one another and how they connect with one another. Because in the rest of the class, when we get to sizing workloads, when we get to, here's what we're looking at for the perfmon metrics and things of that nature, we're looking at all those things because we have to figure out where are we going and what is the sizing and what do we maintain that. And I love that approach. Bless you.
Sorry.
That you took that to. That's all right. Okay. So we're down to the last 10 minutes. And this is where I'm going to throw in some of the new stuff. So naturally, we're talking SQL, and there's a big new release coming out for SQL Server 2025.
What?
And I know maybe you've heard.
I hadn't heard about this at all. Are you sure this is a real thing?
It is a real thing. I was talking with Bob Ward. He assured me it is real. And it is happening.
It's crazy.
I know. You're so plugged in and connected. I would have thought that you were the one kicking off this topic.
I've been busy.
You've been, well, yeah, that's right. Getting another master's degree because, Master Tom.
Why only have one when you can have two? That's the government thing, right?
Exactly. Well, and not only that, you're a certified master for SQL Server, so 3 masters.
Well, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't make me
start calling you Sifu when I see you. All right. So when we think about SQL Server 2025, and there are aspects of that we're going to be covering in class as it relates to performance, things of that nature. This is my very specific question that I'll babble and give you all time. What is something you're excited about for SQL 2025 as it relates to performance or capabilities? You could just give me an all up thing if you're you're excited about. Right. But I'd also extra points if you can give me something that pertains to our pre-con as well. So I'm very excited for this, and I've done 2 presentations on this. I did one for Jacksonville, and then I did one in Orlando with Dan. And it was a wonderful honor to be able to do this because Bob actually reached out to marketing and said, I can't make it to these events. I've got other things I need to do, but please talk with Bradley and please talk with Bradley and Dan. And that made me pleased to no end to kind of get tapped into the game by Bob Ward. I mean, I don't know how to fit that in my resume yet, but you best believe that's going in the resume. So I look at that and I'm thinking about this release, and it's got a ton of amazing things and a ton of awesome things especially when it comes to those scalability of workloads with the connection for mirroring for Microsoft Fabric, also the CES events to be able to do streaming. I'm excited about a lot of different things. Tom, let me cut to you. Do you have something for SQL 2025 that you're excited about?
Well, I did until you said it has to relate to our pre-con. So now I'm looking at the long list of things that we're talking about.
Doesn't have to. You can tell me about the thing you're excited about. If another one comes up, we got some time.
So my default when people talk to me about SQL 25, and there's a lot in there, my default is to talk about vector search. But I tried to remember most people that are interacting with SQL Server right now aren't even in the world of, where they would be thinking a vector search would be a useful thing. So I understand the reasoning why, Microsoft would put this feature into the product, but most of the time people may or may not be using a relational database for that type of activity, but that's fine. What I'm excited is for if we can get people to understand how they can use vector search in a more practical manner than, the default example you always get is text documents. But there are other applications for vector search. And I think it would be interesting to start seeing some of those use cases and stories shared and getting people to understand just how kind of important having this inside of a relational database, this feature, it's kind of an important thing. It'll be a big deal, bigger deal, could be a bigger deal over time. So that's the thing that I'm kind of excited about, vector search.
So on that note, I do want to say, having presented a couple times, and I'm actually going to see if I could dig up the demo for this. So I'm going to talk very briefly. Then Dan, I'm going to cut to you to see if I could get the demo before we close out. But actually, from a performance perspective, Tom, vector is absolutely something, because the capability to search for something using text that is similar but not quite the same tax as, because as we know, a vector is going to be adjacent. Like if I say to an LM model, tell me a story about a king and a queen and a princess that went on a picnic. Those things are going to have similar natures to one another. Like the model isn't going to actually know what those things are, but it knows that a king and a queen and a princess indicates a family structure where we probably got a mom and dad and a daughter. It knows what a picnic is that people typically take food on a picnic and they have a picnic outside, sitting somewhere together. And so if the LLM came back and said, once upon a time, a king and a queen went on a picnic together, they hopped in their carriage and they went out to the countryside with the princess, and they found a really nice tree and they put a blanket down and they sat and they opened up their picnic basket and they had sandwiches and a really good time. The model is pulling these vectors, these mathematical indexes of words that are close to one another. And so one of the examples that Bob gave us in the deck was specifically how like, or, contains, or even full text search could not pull back some of the same information that if we vectorize the description and use that vector using words that may not exist in the description of products, that we actually got a more complete list using vectorization. So one of the things I would say is looking at vectors and the capability for you to have better performance and better results on searching. Absolutely do think that fits in with what we're doing. Dan, I'm going to cut over to you. What are you excited about for SQL 2025?
Optimized locking. It's been in Azure SQL DB today, and I don't know if you've ever done demos in Azure SQL DB and you're like, why can't I get this to lock? It's because of optimized locking. That's coming to SQL Server 2025. So you're going to have it on premises or an Azure VM. For me, because we're talking about analytics workloads and scaling to possibly some of those analytic workloads, the readable secondary, the stats, the ability to update stats on your readable secondaries is coming out. That's a really cool feature. And then also the query store on the secondaries is going to be huge when it comes to AGs and that. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about managed instance link to migrate some of these things to expand your analytics workload. We're going to talk about ways to get to Azure SQL DB. And I know it's a buzzword, but I actually love this buzzword. It's the most enterprise ready from ground to cloud that we've done yet. And we plug in a lot of these features from 2025 to the cloud. And that I'm really excited about because it allows us to expand those analytics workloads into the cloud pretty easily.
No, I'm completely with you. Okay, so one of the, I'm trying to get this to go from current slide. There we go. And then I'm going to share my screen. Throw us right there. See if I can get this to work. Okay, so we've got our on-prem AdventureWorks database, and as you can see on vectors, this is that example. We're looking at like to be able to look at show me stuff for extreme sports, also contains, and then even a free text description. And what you're going to notice about all of these is that I get very little results, and even those results that I did get from free text were in another language. And so when I look at this, the thing that I really like is that, oh, hold on, let me get to the next slide on this. Sorry, we didn't plan this, so I'm trying to go. What we have to do is, in this case, we're going to create an external model. In this case, we're using an Olama, and it could be in Azure. It could also be on-prem. And what we're doing is we're going to create this external model so that way we can connect to it. And you can see this is using a llama. So it's literally allows you to be able to connect to whatever model you actually want to be able to connect to. And then we're going to create a stored procedure specifically to be able to create embeddings on this table. Now, the first thing we'll do is we will reach out to the model and we will insert data using the stored procedure, using the embeddings. And we're making this call right here using the model that we created, passing through the description of our product description. And then once we do that, we can create a vector index on top of this as well. And one of the things I love about this is so it's searchable, it's indexable. So we go ahead and we run this. We take the prompt as well, so that way we can search through this. And again, this is T-SQL code. This is the T-SQL code we already know. And you can see we're selecting using a vector select to be able to pull this information from our vector search. And so this gives us the capability to be able to take and run this, to be able to insert vectorized data for our product description. And then we can run a stored proc where we say, show me stuff for extreme sports. And one of the things you'll find is that we're actually pulling back multiple columns, but also in multiple languages, because by default, the model speaks multiple languages. So when we're looking at performance, part of performance is, did I actually get a result? And this actually gets a result for you. Now, the really neat thing is if we dove into this a little bit more, and I know we're close to time, so I'm going to go ahead and bring us back out a little bit more. If we went into this further, what we could do is we could see that we could change models to be able to specialize for multiple different languages. So I'm really, really excited about this technology. And Tom, you're absolutely right. Vectors for performance. We've got indexing for vectors, and we've also got the capability to use them to get better results. Super excited about this and super excited. And we've only scratched the surface. People who are watching this, and God bless you for watching this on video, go register for the conference, take $500 off the conference with the code Tales from the Field. And we're just going to have a great time. We hope to see you there. And you're going to see why this is my favorite conference every single year. My hope is that you're going to be coming back to join us again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off our closing. Tom, any closing thoughts for folks?
No. I love this event. I love the people there. I love presenting with you guys. It's one of my favorite events as well. I'm really looking forward to being there, especially this year, right before Thanksgiving in Orlando. I can't wait.
Absolutely. Dan, how about yourself? Final thoughts?
Tales from the Field, $500 off. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, buddy. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, next week we have Matt Gordon and we have Christopher Schmidt joining us to talk about their pre-con on real-time intelligence. Thank you, Dan Taylor. Thank you, Tom LaRock. Love you guys very much. Hope to see you at Live 360. Thank you for joining us. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
A goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration.